Among the first utterances by a pre-Jorts John Cena on WWE programming were the company's ordained buzzwords of the day: Ruthless Aggression. Following the Attitude Era and the one-year grace period of botching invasions from WCW, WWE instituted a new era of sorts. One that fans of a bit younger than the Attitude heyday look back on fondly because it was their era. And no doubt, Ruthless Aggression spawned many good things, from the rise of the Ohio Valley Four, the establishment of tremendous wrestling on SmackDown, and many memorable rivalries and character turns. But not every individual under that ruthlessly aggressive spotlight thrived. For every rated R superstar and doctor of thugonomics, there are those that never could get out of the starting blocks. While some flourished, others faded away with barely a sound. Let's turn back the clock to those years with the double zeros in the middle and scope out some WWE superstars who, with all due respect, didn't prove to be super, nor could you call them stars. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 forgotten Ruthless Aggression superstars. Join us! Number 10, the Teacher's Pets. For about a year from Judgment Day 2006 onward, Paul London and Brian Kendrick defended their WWE Tag Team titles on each and every SmackDown pay-per-view, although at times it seemed like Creative had to scrape some duos together for the highest of hooligans to square off with. No Mercy that year gave us a pretty good match, albeit a forgettable one, that pitted London and Kendrick against two OVW standouts that ended up not being long for the main roster. They were Casey James and Idol Stevens, sometimes referred to as the Teacher's Pets. That's because their manager was former science teacher Michelle McCool, whose arena attire definitely played on the hot for teacher stereotype. Casey James looked like the love child of Bobby Eaton, while Stevens looked like a clean-shaven Damien Sandow, which is because he was a clean-shaven Damien Sandow, years before discovering the comfort that a plush bathrobe can provide. The month following No Mercy, James and Stevens faded from the SmackDown roster, and James retired 2 years later. Number 9, Johnny Stamboli. One of the few real bright spots in the barren wasteland that was 2000 WCW was the high-risk exuberance of Johnny the Bull. Built like the heavyweight roughneck he portrayed, Stamboli also demonstrated grace in brutality, throwing caution to the wind in various hardcore-based matches. See slingshot plancha leg drop, chair, and subsequent broken ass. Upon arriving on WWE's main roster in the summer of 2002, Stamboli was 25 years old and with plenty to offer. Stamboli figured into the dying days of the hardcore title scene, particularly in taking an incredible clothesline from hell from Bradshaw, who charged in from off-camera, but after that he was little more than a peripheral figure. His time with the three-man full-blooded Italians pretty much pitted him as third banana behind Nunzio and Chuck Palumbo, and Stamboli found himself tucked deep in the undercard prior to his November 2004 release. This is a shame because somebody with his physical gifts had much more to offer than being a background player. Number 8, Ryan SAKODA. Like Stamboli, SAKODA found himself in the third slot on a depth chart of 3 and fell considerably behind the stardom enjoyed by his two cohorts. After working the odd Sunday Night Heat match in 2003 as an underneath guy, SAKODA signed a developmental deal with the company but found a TV role shortly after. At No Mercy 2003, SAKODA joined Jimmy Yang, who was redubbed Akio, in helping Cruiserweight champion Tajiri defeat Rey Mysterio. SAKODA and Akio played mysterious suit-wearing henchmen for Tajiri, interfering on his behalf wherever possible, and occasionally wrestling as well. When the group disbanded, SAKODA went adrift, though he did get to wrestle John Cena on an episode of SmackDown in May 2004, lucky boy. He left the company that August, his final match coming the month prior in a losing effort to Funaki on Velocity. To date, SAKODA's last match overall took place in September 2007, losing to a man that just so happens to be number 1 on this list. Stay tuned. Number 7, Johnny PARISI. Hit up the Wayback Machine and let's go back to 2005, when WWE pilfered a fairly talented wrestler from the ranks of Total Non-Stop Action. He was a former tag team champion with the company and even resided in the upper mid-card of ECW during the final 6 to 8 months of its lifetime. Said wrestler comes to WWE, takes on the PARISI name as a tribute to his uncle, former WWF tag team champion Tony PARISI, and well, yeah, it's kind of forgotten to history, isn't it? Johnny PARISI was better known as Johnny Swinger, longtime ally of Simon Diamond that carved out a pretty good niche for himself as a villainous tag team wrestler. He debuted as PARISI on Sunday Night Heat in July 2005 and lost almost every match he had on the secondary show, never once wrestling on Monday Night Raw. Swinger ended up getting his release in June 2006 following the long period of kayfabe futility and has spent the 13 years since wrestling primarily in Georgia and Alabama before returning to Impact Wrestling this year. Number 6. Bam Neely. Perhaps one day we here at Cultaholic will do a feature on every single beefy heavyweight that was called up from developmental to be someone's bodyguard or enforcer, but for now we'll focus on this particular example. OVW talent Justin the Ox LaRouche spent about 16 months in developmental before migrating to the ECW brand in April 2008, where Chavo Guerrero enlisted his menacing muscle. Big Justin was renamed Bam Neely, a not-so-subtle play on the name Cam Neely, who was a tough-as-nails NHL veteran that also played a malevolent trucker named Seabass in Dumb and Dumber, The More You Know. Anyway, Neely received plenty of airtime through his partnership with Guerrero, as well as his extended connection to Edge's La Familia stable, but he was mostly just a looming figure and little more. In January 2009, 9 months after his main roster debut, Neely was released from WWE and retired from wrestling the following year. Number 5. Gunner Scott. Some of the names on this list never enjoyed any real success on the main roster, banging their head on a rather low ceiling before being shuffled out of the door. Such wasn't the case for Scott, who hit the ground running on SmackDown in the spring of 2006, and yet, even with that early success, he still made his exit rather hastily, despite showing some incredible promise. It's one of the more bizarre career arcs of any main roster talent. Scott, better known as future NWA World Champion Brent Albright, debuted as an enhancement talent who scored an upset win over Booker T. This earned him the respect of Chris Benoit, who took Scott under his wing for a brief spell. However, within 3 months, Scott was sent back to developmental and released later that year. As Albright, the gifted technician ended up in Ring of Honor not long after and bounced around various indies before retiring from the ring in December 2011. From a quick push out of the gate to being swept off the stage in under 3 months. Such was the WWE run of Gunner Scott. Number 4. KRISSY VAINE. In early 2006, KRISSY VAINE debuted in then WWE developmental group Deep South Wrestling, where she eventually performed as the group's evil general manager. She was involved in angles with Natalya, Matt Striker, and Angel Williams, the eventual Angelina Love, before receiving her call-up to the main roster of WWE in September 2007. However, even the most devoted watcher of SmackDown may have trouble remembering VAINE, who was gone from the company quicker than a hiccup. She debuted in rather notable fashion, attacking the popular Tori Wilson one Friday night. The following week, she appeared once more on the show in a segment with Vicky Guerrero, which aired 5 nights before VAINE was released from the company. As it turns out, her and her boyfriend, developmental talent Ryan O'Reilly, asked for their releases apparently due to health-related issues concerning both of their families. Her only 2 matches on the main roster came at house shows on consecutive nights, losing to Michelle McCool. Since then, VAINE has married O'Reilly, who you know better today as Connor of the Ascension. Number 3. C.W. Anderson. When WWE launched its own version of ECW in 2006, it didn't take long for the flavor of extreme to wear off. Though the presence of Rob Van Dam, Tommy Dreamer, Sabu, and the Sandman reinforced a bit of the classic ECW, they were among the few originals treated like top guys. The FBI, Balls Mahoney, Danny Doring and Roadkill, Stevie Richards, Just Incredible, their win-loss records on the brand made Kurt Hawkins look like 2015 Roman Reigns. For any ECW original outside of the core 4, their time in the reboot was unmemorable, but not as unmemorable as C.W. Anderson. Part of the next generation of the kayfabe Anderson family, CW carried on the mantle of hard-nosed wrestling from his forebears and feuded memorably with Dreamer in the original company, including a brutal I Quit match at the final pay-per-view. 6 years later, Anderson, who was renamed Christopher W. Anderson, so as not to confuse him with the CW network I guess, wrestled primarily on house shows over a 3-month stretch in 2006, losing once on TV to upstart CM Punk, and then was released months later. Number 2, The Heartthrobs and the Dicks. That title sounds like the least ambiguous romance novel of all time, but there's little to romanticize about the lifespan of these two mid-card duos. We start with the Heartthrobs, Antonio and Romeo, bursting onto the Raw scene in April 2005 and bringing with them a lively and suggestive entrance that prompted William Regal and Tajiri to make some boggled glances in their direction. Months later on SmackDown, James and Chad Dick debuted as Chippendales dancers called, what else? The Dicks. The two never really got out of the gate as anything outside of undercard chum for the pushed wrestlers to feast on, and by this time the Heartthrobs had cooled off considerably as well. In February 2006, both teams were released from the company at a time in which tag team wrestling in WWE was really downplayed, more than usual anyway. At a point when there was about a 50-50 shot that a brand's tag champs were just two thrown together single stars, steady duos had less chance at success. Number 1, Frankie Kazarian. Christopher Daniels was occasionally a weekend enhancement talent for WWE at the turn of the century, while Scorpio Sky attended anger management sessions with Daniel Bryan and Kane. Of the three SCU members, Kazarian overall had the best WWE run, though it really wasn't much more than a footnote. In July 2005, 5 months after leaving TNA and signing with WWE, Kaz finally made his first televised appearance with the company. In the span of 1 month, Kazarian, whose theme song began with what sounded like a sedated elephant singing over a xylophone before shifting into some lively metal, went undefeated on WWE Velocity, toppling Nunzio, Scotty 2 Hotty, Funaki, and Paul London before asking for his release. Reportedly, Kazarian wanted out after learning that WWE didn't have any real plans for its cruiserweight division, while Kazarian revealed that he was upset at being asked by the company to cut off his Antonio Banderas-esque long hair. Kazarian later chalked up his annoyance with the latter issue to his own immaturity at the time, though it didn't seem to hinder his career too much. He's still going strong at age 42, long after his obscure cup of coffee with the E.
Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. You can follow us on Twitter at Cultaholic. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do here at Cultaholic, you can pledge to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Cultaholic. And most importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us.